My CEO laughed in my face when I asked for a 10% raise, so I took my skills to his biggest rival. Before we dive into the story, I'd love to know, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments. I'm always curious to see how far these stories reach. Now, let's get into it. My name is Ava Collins, and for the last 5 years, I poured every ounce of myself into a mid-sized logistics company in Chicago. I wasn't flashy, I wasn't loud, but I was dependable. The kind of worker who picked up the late-night calls when shipments went sideways, who stayed until midnight fixing spreadsheets nobody else understood, who saved clients from walking away after my boss bungled a meeting. My title said operations manager, but in reality, I wore every hat they tossed at me: planner, negotiator, firefighter, therapist. I thought it would eventually pay off. The man in charge was Grant Whitaker, our CEO. Picture a tall, perfectly groomed executive who oozed arrogance from the moment he walked into a room. He had money, connections, and the smug grin of someone who never worried about losing either. To him, employees weren't people, they were tools. Replaceable, interchangeable, useful only until they broke. And somehow, I was the most useful one of all. I didn't mind working hard. I believed in proving myself. But there's a difference between dedication and exploitation, and I was starting to realize which side of the line I was on. After saving the company nearly $500,000 by restructuring a failing shipping contract, I finally felt like I had a little leverage. I didn't want the world. I didn't want a fancy title or a 6-figure bonus. All I wanted was a 10% raise. Enough to reflect the endless nights, the holidays missed, the literal headaches and stress that came with keeping the place afloat. I practiced my speech a dozen times. I even wrote bullet points in a small notebook I kept tucked in my bag. When the day came, I straightened my blazer, took a deep breath, and walked into Grant's corner office. The view was gorgeous, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline. But I only noticed how far away I felt from that kind of life. He barely looked up when I stepped in, flicking through emails on his phone like I was already wasting his time. I told him calmly, clearly, about the money I'd saved, the fires I'd put out, the clients I'd kept from leaving. I explained that a modest 10% raise would reflect the value I brought every single day. For a moment, he was quiet, and I thought maybe, just maybe, I'd finally broken through his arrogance. Then he leaned back, threw his head back, and laughed. Not a polite chuckle. Not even a dismissive smirk. A full, mocking laugh, like I had just told him the funniest joke in the world. "You should be grateful you even have a seat at this table, Ava," he said, wiping the corner of his eye from laughing so hard. "A raise? 10%. Don't kid yourself." The sting of those words cut deeper than I expected. My face burned, my chest tightened, but I didn't let him see me break. I nodded, forced a tight smile, and left his office without another word. He thought the conversation ended there. But as I walked back to my desk, humiliation twisting into something sharper, I made myself a promise. That laugh wouldn't be the last thing he remembered about me. It would be the beginning of his downfall. I met Clara at her bar after my shift, the one place where I could peel off the professional mask and let the frustration spill out. She slid a drink across the counter before I even asked, studying my face with that sharp gaze of hers. "You look like hell, Ava. What happened this time?" The words tumbled out faster than I expected. I told her how I had gone in with numbers, facts, results, everything that proved I wasn't just pulling my weight, I was carrying it. And instead of listening, he laughed. I didn't bother hiding the tremor in my voice as I repeated the line about being grateful to have a seat at the table. Clara's jaw tightened. "You don't need him," she said flatly, wiping down a glass. "Make him need you." Her words hit me harder than the whiskey. Because deep down, I knew she was right. As I stared into the drink, memories came rushing back. The meeting where Grant had shown up unprepared, stumbling over client questions, until I quietly slid my notes across the table to save him. The quarterly review where the logistics software nearly crashed, and I stayed all weekend patching the problem, only for him to present the fix like it had been his idea. The press release that went out under his name, when the draft had come entirely from me after he'd fumbled with the first attempt. Again and again, I had stepped in, smoothed things over, and let him shine while I faded into the background. It wasn't loyalty anymore. It was servitude. And the worst part was he knew it. Clara leaned in, lowering her voice. "You've been giving him free wins for years. Stop handing him your work on a silver platter. Take that brilliance somewhere that actually deserves it." I shook my head at first, instinctively recoiling. Leave. The thought of walking away terrified me. I had convinced myself that staying was safer, even if it meant being invisible. But her words lingered, threading themselves into my thoughts. What if I did leave? What if I put myself in a place where the hours meant something, where the grind wasn't wasted on someone else's ego? That night, when I got home, I opened my laptop. The screen glowed in the dark apartment, a blank document waiting for me. My resume hadn't been touched in years, but I started typing. Bullet points, achievements, the projects I had saved. I polished every line, making sure it reflected the truth I had been hiding under Grant's shadow. It was the first step, small but electric. I wasn't ready to announce anything. Not yet, but as I saved the document and shut the laptop, I felt something shift. For the first time in a long while, the future didn't look like a dead end. It looked like possibility. Clara's cousin, Michael, stopped by the bar one evening while I was nursing a soda and venting quietly about another exhausting week. He listened without interrupting, his brow furrowing deeper with each detail. When I finished, he leaned closer and said, "You know, my boss would eat this up. He's always looking for people who can actually deliver." I raised an eyebrow, curious. "Your boss?" "Derek Vaughn," he replied. The name was familiar. Anyone in logistics knew it. Vaughn Logistics was the thorn in Grant's side, the competitor he complained about in every strategy meeting. The idea of crossing paths with Derek felt almost dangerous, like stepping into enemy territory. Michael grinned when he saw my hesitation. "Relax. He's not a monster. In fact, he's the kind of leader who actually listens. I could introduce you. No strings, just a conversation." I laughed nervously, but something inside me stirred. The next week, I agreed to meet Michael for coffee, and that's where Derek walked in, tall, confident, and sharply dressed, but without the arrogance that clung to Grant like cologne. His handshake was firm, his eyes focused, and when Michael mentioned my role, Derek didn't just nod politely, he asked questions. Real ones. "How did you manage to handle all that on your own?" he asked after hearing about a shipment disaster I had salvaged. His tone wasn't disbelief, it was respect. I shrugged modestly, though my chest tightened at the recognition. Someone had to keep things moving. He leaned back, studying me with genuine interest. "That kind of initiative is exactly what my team needs. I'd like to offer you an interview. I think you'd thrive with us." The words landed heavy. An interview with Grant's rival? It felt almost treasonous. I could imagine Grant's sneer if he ever found out, the way he'd twist it into betrayal. Yet, sitting there across from Derek, I felt something I hadn't in years seen. Valued. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, my mind split in two. Walking into Vaughn Logistics would mean burning a bridge I had spent years holding up. But staying meant continuing to sacrifice myself for someone who didn't care if I crumbled. Which was worse, betraying Grant or betraying myself? By morning, the decision formed like a whisper I couldn't ignore. I texted Michael, short and simple, "I'll meet him." It wasn't public. It wasn't official. But it was the first secret I kept from Grant. And it carried the kind of weight that could change everything. The office at Vaughn Logistics felt different from the moment I walked in. Bright, open spaces, people actually smiling at their desks, a quiet hum of energy that didn't feel forced. Derek greeted me personally, then handed me off to his senior managers for the interview. They asked pointed questions about systems, processes, crisis management, and with each answer I gave, their expressions shifted from polite interest to genuine surprise. One of them finally blurted, "You handled all of that alone?" I nodded, a little uneasy, but the truth was undeniable. What had been dismissed as routine at my old job suddenly looked extraordinary through their eyes. When Derek returned, he carried none of Grant's condescension. He sat across from me, hands folded, and said, "Ava, your track record speaks volumes. I don't usually move this fast, but I don't want to waste time. I want you here." He laid out the numbers, salary well above what I had dared to ask for before, a signing bonus that made my breath catch, and more than that, the promise of independence. "I don't hire babysitters," he said firmly. "I hire leaders. You'll have the authority to make decisions without being second-guessed." For a moment, I couldn't speak. All those years of grinding, hoping for a sliver of acknowledgement, and here was someone offering me more than I ever imagined, without hesitation. The knot in my chest loosened in a way I hadn't realized was possible. I accepted, my voice steady even as my pulse raced. Derek's handshake sealed it, solid and certain. Walking out of the building, I kept the news tucked close to my chest. I wasn't ready to announce it, not to anyone at work, not even to colleagues I trusted. Grant would find out soon enough, and I wanted that revelation to hit him like a storm he never saw coming. On the train ride home, staring out the window at the blur of city lights, my humiliation from that day in his office replayed in my mind. The mocking laughter, the words that had sliced through me. Now the sting was replaced with something colder, sharper. For the first time, I saw the shape of revenge forming, not out of spite alone, but out of necessity. Grant had dismissed me as replaceable. Soon, he would learn exactly how wrong he had been. I didn't rush my exit. If there was one thing I had learned working under Grant, it was that timing mattered. Leaving without preparation would only hand him another chance to belittle me. So I moved carefully, quietly. At home, I began building a portfolio, project records, performance reports, client testimonials. Not stolen secrets, just documented proof of the work I had carried on my shoulders. Late at night, I organized files into neat folders, polishing them until they told the story he never wanted to acknowledge. That I had been the backbone all along. Clara checked in constantly, her tone a mix of encouragement and fire. One evening, while stacking glasses behind her bar, she leaned close and whispered, "Don't just slip out. Let him feel it when you're gone. Let him scramble in the hole you leave behind." Her words echoed every time I stepped into a meeting. Grant's jabs hadn't stopped. If anything, they had grown sharper. In front of the team, he'd smirk and toss out comments like, "Anyone can do this job," or "We could replace half this department tomorrow." The room would fall into uneasy silence, eyes darting toward me before quickly looking away. He thought it was power. To me, it was proof of his blindness. I smiled through it, jotting notes, never reacting. But inside, I repeated his favorite insult like a mantra, replaceable. The irony of it burned sweet in my chest. Because I knew the day was coming when that word would strangle him, when the absence of my work, my presence, my reliability would rip through his empire in ways he couldn't patch with smugness. Every file saved, every plan tucked away, every calm smile I wore in those meetings was another step toward the door. He believed he had the upper hand. I knew better. The silence of my preparation would be the loudest sound he'd ever hear. The day I chose to walk into Grant's office, the letter was already printed, folded neatly in a plain envelope. No long explanations, no apologies, just a short, professional notice typed in clean black ink. My hands didn't shake as I placed it on his desk. He glanced at it, skimmed the words, then looked up at me with disbelief etched across his face. For a man so certain of his control, the idea of me leaving hadn't even crossed his mind. "You're quitting." His tone carried more insult than question. "Yes," I replied evenly. "Nothing more." He pushed the paper aside like it was a mistake. "Don't be ridiculous, Ava. You wouldn't survive out there. Where are you going?" I held his stare, calm, deliberate. "Somewhere I'm valued." The smirk returned, that familiar curl of his lips I had grown to despise. He leaned back in his chair, scoffing. "Please. No serious company would take you. You've been lucky here, nothing more. You'll come crawling back once reality hits." His words rolled off me this time. The mockery didn't sting. It only confirmed everything I already knew about him. I didn't flinch, didn't argue, didn't defend. I simply collected my folder, offered a polite nod, and turned toward the door. He called after me, still fishing. "At least tell me who's foolish enough to hire you." I paused, hand on the knob, and let silence hang in the air before answering with a measured smile. "That's not something you need to know." Then I walked out without looking back. The name he wanted so badly stayed unspoken, tucked away like a secret weapon. Whatever he imagined, he would never guess the truth until it was too late. The transition into Vaughn Logistics felt like stepping into fresh air after years underground. Within weeks, I wasn't just another cog in the machine. I was leading a team. Derek handed me real authority, trusting my calls without second-guessing, letting me design processes and steer projects the way I knew they needed to be run. My ideas weren't dismissed, they were implemented. And when results came quickly, the respect only deepened. The change didn't stay quiet for long. In logistics, word travels fast. Clients talked, competitors noticed, and whispers about my move threaded through the industry. It wasn't long before the story landed exactly where I knew it would, Grant's desk. The day he found out, I could almost picture his reaction. The widening eyes, the disbelief twisting into anger. Out of all the companies, I had joined the one man he despised most. To him, it wasn't just an employee leaving. It was betrayal. His pride had been built on the idea that people like me couldn't walk away, that his grip was unshakable. Now that illusion was gone. The proof came quickly. My phone lit up with his number, again and again. First, short calls I let ring out. Then longer attempts, followed by voicemails full of half-forced bravado, pretending he still held the upper hand. When that didn't work, the tone shifted. Less arrogant, more desperate. He even began circling through colleagues, fishing for a way to reach me. I ignored every attempt. Not out of cruelty, but because there was nothing left to say. He had laughed when I asked for more. He had mocked me when I chose to leave. Now he wanted me back only because he realized what I had taken with me. Each time his name flashed across the screen, I let it fade into silence. And each time, the silence felt like justice. The shift began subtly, then gathered speed like a storm rolling in. Contracts that had once seemed locked in for Grant's firm started sliding across the table to Vaughn Logistics. Longtime partners who used to grit their teeth through delays and sloppy execution now saw an alternative. One where I was at the helm of operations, ensuring things actually ran the way they were promised. I never touched anything proprietary. I didn't need to. Years of untangling disasters under Grant had given me an instinct for where the cracks would form, how to close them before they split wide open. At Vaughn, those lessons became strategies, and those strategies turned into wins. Clients who had tolerated excuses suddenly experienced efficiency they hadn't thought possible, and word spread fast. One after another, deals shifted our way. What had been Grant's safety net was unraveling, thread by thread, and there was nothing he could do to stitch it back together. The same arrogance that had blinded him to my value now blinded him to why the losses were mounting. He could rage, he could blame, but the truth was simple. People wanted results, and we delivered. The financial hit was only part of it. Reputation carried as much weight as numbers, and his was eroding. Whispers in meetings, quiet chuckles at networking events, sideways glances at conferences. It was clear. The industry had noticed the decline, and his name was no longer spoken with respect, but with pity. Desperation clung to him now, a sharp contrast to the smugness he once wielded so easily. Each lost account was another crack in the image he had worked so hard to project. The empire he believed untouchable was beginning to crumble, and he knew exactly whose absence had opened the first gap. I was reviewing schedules with my team when the receptionist buzzed me, her voice tight. "A man named Grant Whitaker is here asking for you." The name alone stiffened the air around me. A moment later, he appeared in the doorway, wearing that same tailored suit, the same practiced grin. For a second, it was as if nothing had changed, except everything had. He opened with swagger, striding in like he still had the right. "Nice place you've got here, Ava. Though, let's be honest, you wouldn't have landed it without what you learned under me." I leaned back in my chair, studying him in silence. His tone wavered when I didn't bite. The grin faltered, replaced with a crack of unease. Then came the shift, his voice dropping, his shoulders stiff. "Look, I'll make this simple. Come back. I'll match whatever you're getting here. Double it. Title, office, whatever you want." It was jarring, watching him twist himself into bargains. The man who once told me I should be grateful was now stacking promises like chips on a losing hand. And then I saw it, the flicker in his eyes. Not arrogance. Not disdain. Fear. I stood slowly, closing the space between us. My voice was calm, but every word landed sharp. "Do you remember laughing at me, Grant? When I asked for something as small as 10%. Do you remember telling me I should be thankful for a seat at your table?" He swallowed hard, searching for a retort, but none came. "I didn't just leave," I said, my voice steady as glass. "I leveled up, and you taught me exactly why I had to." His expression collapsed, pride cracking under the weight of the truth. I didn't wait for an answer. I walked him out with the same polite smile I had given when I resigned, then turned back to my office without a second glance. Clara poured 2 glasses and slid one my way, her eyes shining with that knowing look only she could pull off. The bar was quiet, dim light bouncing off the bottles behind her. For the first time in years, I felt lighter, like the weight I had carried was finally off my shoulders. "It's not just the paycheck," I told her, swirling the drink. "It's finally being treated like my work matters. Like I matter." She smirked, leaning on the counter. "Told you he'd feel it when you left." And from the sound of it, he's still spiraling. News of Grant's decline had become a steady drumbeat. Lost contracts, shrinking staff, investors pulling away. Meanwhile, Derek's company was thriving, stronger every week. The contrast couldn't have been sharper. I thought about guilt, whether I should feel any. But the truth settled in clear as the glass in my hand. I never betrayed him. He betrayed me the moment he dismissed my worth, the moment he chose mockery over recognition. All I did was walk away. Clara raised her glass. No regrets then? I smiled, a slow, certain grin. Funny how he laughed at me for asking 10%. Turns out walking away was worth 100. We clinked glasses, and in that sound was closure. Do you think I made the right call by walking away, or should I have given him another chance? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe.